Let's start out by taking a look at different types of growth rates and growth curves. Here's a chart showing population size on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. The first growth rate we'll look at is exponential. This is when the population grows at a rate proportional to the size of the population, even as the size of the population itself increases. This is what we see with human population. Another type of growth rate is geometric. This is very similar to exponential but slightly slower. Geometric growth occurs when an organism has a well-defined reproductive cycle, such as in horses, they only come into heat in the fall and the spring, so there's limited times when they can actually reproduce. Whereas with humans, we can reproduce any time of the year. Next, we have linear or arithmetic growth, and this is where the growth rate remains constant. And finally, we have logarithmic or logistical growth, and this is based off of the mathematical calculation of log, just like exponential is based on e, or the exponential mathematical equation. And logistical growth starts out the same as exponential growth, but it tapers out and it plateaus. And this is because it is influenced by K, which is the carrying capacity. And we will talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. But first, I want to show you a little cheat sheet. If you take a look on your right hand, you will see that you have what are called lifelines here. And you can see one of them resembles an exponential growth curve. The middle line resembles a linear growth curve, and the bottom line resembles a logistical growth curve. So it's kind of a cheat sheet right there on your hand. Now let's talk about human population. We've been growing at a steady rate, but then in 1650 is when we really started to have an exponential growth. This exponential growth, as we were talking about, is because we were able to overcome the carrying capacity. And your carrying capacity is the limiting factors that prevent a population from continuing to grow. So this carrying capacity is based on an ecological footprint. And this ecological footprint depends on how many resources are being used. So for example, some of the things in history that helped us overcome this carrying capacity was, first off, the agricultural revolution, where now all of a sudden we were able to grow a lot more food, and thus we could feed more people. Also, in addition to that, we've had medical advances, such as realizing about germs with the germ theory. We've had the Industrial Revolution, which has allowed us to mass produce items and food, as well as transport these items and food all around the world. We've had impacts in sanitation, such as using soap. And more recently, we've had advances in biotechnology, which is related to agriculture and how we're going to be able to feed this increasing population. Now, in 1962, the human population growth rate peaked at 2.2%. Now it's decreased to 1.1%, but it's still estimated in 2050 we will have between 9.3 and 12.3 billion people. And that is related on your TFR, or your total fertility rate. Now here's a pretty cool website, breathingearth.net, and it is a map that shows you real time what the population is. So April 20th, 2015, the population was 7.3 billion. Then it also shows us how many people have been born. And so every time you see one of these little stars, that's a birth. It also shows us how many people have died. So when you see one of these little black circles, that's representing a death. And then it also shows us how many tons of CO2 has been emitted. And you can see that in the country here, if it shines red, that means that it has emitted 1,000 tons of CO2. And taking a look at this map, we can see how human population influences our ecology and our planet around us. I'm just going to go ahead and be quiet and let you guys take a look at this map and the differences, and notice that in the developed countries such as the United States, we are emitting a lot more CO2 even though we don't have as many births. And so this is referring to our ecological footprint. And whereas in the developing countries, they are not using a lot of CO2, even though they have a much higher birth rate. So I strongly encourage you to check this site out. Pretty neat. Also kind of scary, but informative.